Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters, both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by T&K Hunting Gear. If you haven't heard about T&K, then it's about time you do. I've been using T&K gear out in the field and on hunts and have fallen in love with their stuff. T&K is veteran-owned and 100% made in America using only American-made products. All their gear is covered under a lifetime warranty with no questions asked. If it breaks or fails, they will fix it or replace it for free. T&K is your resource for bino harnesses, bow slings, and a lot more amazing gear. For more information about T&K Hunting Gear, go to tnkhunting.com or search for them on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Freedom on, and stay soulful. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by the Crazy Elk Company. Based out of the state of Washington with products made in America, they are providing solutions with gear to problems you didn't even know you had. Their tag wallet is one of those solutions, and I had the pleasure of using it on all of my hunts this last year, and it is now a mainstay in my kill kit. The tag wallet is a water-resistant zippered pouch that comes with its own reusable zip ties to safely and securely store your notch tag for quick and easy access. For more information, go to crazyelkcompany.com and use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. Be blessed, everyone, and as always, stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and tonight I got another awesome episode for you. And today is all about archery hunting, specifically broadheads. We got Micah Brown and Brodie of Annihilator Broadheads on to talk about their product that they have developed and created, and I personally have used in this field. Over the year 2020, I got to take an animal with their broadhead as well as see two other people take their animals with their broadhead, and I was very impressed. It was one of the things that back in February of 2020, when I saw Annihilator Broadheads, I was like, oh man, I got to talk to these guys. I want to know more about this broadhead. And through the serendipitous life that we have, you put it out into the universe, and here we are having a conversation on a podcast tonight. So, Brandon and Micah, thank you so much for joining us for an episode.
For sure, man. I know I appreciate it. I'm sure Brandon can speak the same.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Yeah, sorry. The three-way podcast can get a little, you speak over each other every now and then. So I'm gonna try to direct traffic a little bit more. Micah, give us a little background on yourself, and then Brandon will kick it to you right after that.
Sure. Just passionate about hunting. Been doing it for quite some time, and more importantly, passionate about archery hunting. And through kind of my trials and tribulations of doing different stuff in the archery industry, running pro staff programs, that kind of stuff, came up with an idea, and kind of Brandon and I knocked it around a little bit and turned kind of a simple, what we thought was kind of a cool design broadhead into Annihilator. And now we're about a year and a half deep after we launched, and we're running and gunning. So this is kind of about where we're at.
I love it. Brandon, what's the background for you, and how did you end up connecting with Micah? Because you guys are in different states. You're up in Idaho, Micah's down in California. So what's the backlog behind all this?
Yeah, I met Micah in hunting camp, and just a quick little backstory on me is like you, I didn't grow up in a hunting family. I learned as an adult, and specifically archery just through trial and error, and learned I like getting closer to animals, and so through a mutual friend, Micah and I met each other in hunting camp one year, and we just hit it off. And with my background in business and my kind of entrepreneurial passion, that's my degree, and he shared an idea, and we just kind of geeked out on it and said, let's see if we can turn this into something. We don't know what it is, but let's just try. And so we started investing time and resources towards it, and the rest is history. Turned it into what exists before you today. So
Yep, and we're going to be diving into that a little bit more. But I got to hear a little more of this backlog on hunting camp. What hunt were you on? Was it mutual friends that brought you together? A specific animal? Like, give me some more detail on that.
yeah, sure. Yeah, we were elk hunting, and yeah, really just a mutual friend of our we call him Don Juan, and just a good dude. And actually, talk about just how interconnected people are. But and I can let Micah kind of speak more in detail to this. But Micah met Don in the same camp I met Micah. 3-4 years before. It's kind of interesting. And they're all from not next to each other in terms of neighboring cities, but similar areas in California. And then I met Don actually at an archery range out here in Idaho. He had moved up here, and we just kind of hit it off. So, but Micah can kind of tell you how they got connected. So,
yeah, so I was up in the same spot, probably 30 yards from where I met Brandon later on. But this guy Donald and I had shot quite a few 3D archery, NFA 3D archery tournaments here in California, from Redding to some of the other local ones. And we never really, I'm sure we probably came within close proximity of each other, but never, it wasn't a, hey, how's it going, buddy? Because we weren't friends that. But we ended up elk hunting 30 yards from each other as far as staying in camp. And sure enough, we just kind of became friends, through hunting, through elk hunting, and started talking to each other, found out where we lived. And, oh, yeah, okay, you're not too far from me. You're only about a couple hours from me. Oh, okay. Would you ever shoot this shoot? Yeah, I go to that one. Well, I go to that same shoot too. So we started snowballing, and then that's kind of how friendships start. You kind of test the waters a little bit here and there. And we kind of ended up going our separate ways back to California, but then we hooked up and started shooting 3Ds together and became really good friends. And then, like I said, that's how Donald ended up becoming friends with Brandon and brought Brandon to elk camp. And then that's why I met Brandon. So, kind of, just our arm's length away, but multiple states away. It just kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Some of these things that snowball and take off, it's only, through one other person, you end up becoming really good friends with somebody. In my case, my business partner now. So
I love it. So did you guys end up killing an elk on this hunt? And were you side by side on it, or like how did it all play out?
No, Micah was a solo hunter. He had all the spots and didn't want to share.
Yeah, so we all, I mean, in this spot's kind of just, it's a real big hit and miss, like most elk spots are. But everyone had their own. Everyone was going all their different ways and doing different stuff. And this spot we hunt, it's all about timing. You're either in them or you're not in them. It just depends that it's like most spots. It gets hit real hard with wolves and stuff. So in that. I shot an elk the year before that, but then that year, I don't think anybody in camp got one.
No.
So yeah, it just, but it was kind of cool because that gave us a lot of time. When you're, instead of saying, hey, we got to go to bed because we got to go look for something early in the morning, it's hey, let's sit around the fire and drink beer or hang out because no one shot anything.
I love it. I love it. So let's dive into the broadhead topic. And before, I don't know if you guys have ever been asked this question before, and I feel like I'm actually putting you on the spot. Before you developed your own broadhead, Annihilator Broadhead, what broadhead were you guys using, and what were you not satisfied with? Or was it out of a better idea, like, oh, I could tweak this here or do this here? What's the history on your broadhead use, and then what led you to Annihilator? Brandon, we'll go ahead and kick it off with you first.
Sure. Yeah. So at that point I used everything from ramcats, koodoos, buzz cuts, muzzy, just the standard stuff, run of the mill stuff you can get off the shelf, really, I was just dissatisfied. And Micah and I have talked about this, and really the passion for Annihilator spurred out of, there's always one category a broadhead fails in, whether it's penetration or lethality or flight. or durability. You're just constantly trading off. And that was just something we were kind of frustrated with. I had shot an animal the previous year and ended up not getting the penetration that I wanted. It was the first animal I had ever lost. And we spent, 12 straight hours tracking this animal, coming back the next day, looking for birds even on the third day. And it's just a frustrating scenario to be in. And I don't necessarily completely blame the broadhead for that, but I definitely, that was a part of it where I would have expected more penetration out of it. Just sitting around camp, what do? Well, you talk smack to each other, and then you talk about the product you use and who likes what and why and all this stuff. And so that's kind of what got Micah and I spurred up a little bit, is just talking broadheads and, sharing thoughts and stuff. So, but Micah can speak to a little bit more to that as well. So.
Yeah, not wanting to beat a dead horse. A lot of the stuff that Brandon says or had said, I experienced quite a bit of the same, and I'm sure most people, the longer you archery hunt, you're going to get into one of those situations where it's, if I would have had better penetration, if I would have had more blood on the ground, if it would have done this or that. So, like I said, not wanting to beat a dead horse. That's a lot of experiences that I've had with multiple broadheads, and I shot everything. I've shot Hellraisers. I've shot G5 Montex. I've shot Buzzcats, Ramcats, a whole bunch of them. And it comes down to when are you gonna have something that you're fully you're fully vested in. You believe 110% that it's going to do its job, and you see some of those weaknesses or shortcomings when you start shooting and playing with it, like most people should throughout the year leading up to hunting season. You're like, man, I can't get this thing to fly right. Or when I shoot it, every time I shoot it into a target, it's heating up the arrow shaft so bad that I got to sit there for half an hour and scrape the rubber off of it because it's creating so much friction. Well, when you start putting that stuff together and you sit around at elk camp or whatever camp, and if you're not chasing elk, then you drink beer, hang out, and BS, right? So then ideas like this kind of kick off, and when thinking about it and fully getting down to it, those are the four categories that Brandon mentioned earlier: flight, penetration, lethality, and durability. When we kicked this thing off, we knew out of the gate that it was gonna excel in all four of those categories. Not knocking other broadhead companies, but usually a broadhead will fall short in one or multiple areas along that. If you laid out that 4-point standard, someone's going to fall short somewhere. And we knew after designing it, testing it, and then witnessing it. We said, dude, we set out to accomplish those four goals, and we blew the doors off, in our opinion, of all four of those categories.
Yep.
That is so awesome. Well, so if all my listeners have gone onto the YouTube channel or the website and seen the article that I wrote where I compared your guys' broadhead to the Day 6 Evo, the Q80 Exodus, and Iron Wills, all of them, and then obviously the Annihilator, they were all 125 grain broadheads. I have only personally used in the field 2 of those 4, and yours was the one that since last year I had my eye on. I was like, okay, I got to try this. And I was blessed enough and fortunate enough to actually get a kill with your broadhead as well. And it's really interesting. Like you're saying, there's a lot of different things that you could say failed, or you didn't do your job as a shooter or a hunter, or just a combination of everything. And at the end of the day, I really feel like, it's like a pair of shoes. Nike is a good fit for some people, Adidas is a good fit for others, but at the same time, it's easy to fall in love with something when you used it and you've killed something with it. And
Right.
I can speak specifically to your broadhead and say I really enjoyed shooting it. I was able to, and this was part of the story that I was telling you earlier, Brandon, when we spoke on the phone today, but I was able to take a shot at 70 yards on a cow elk quartering away and just stuck it. It was a really tough shot as far as penetration because it entered like the left side, kind of the upper gut area, and then hit front side opposite shoulder blade. So I didn't get the exit wound. The entrance wound wasn't in the vitals, so it wasn't going to get a lot of blood coming out through there. And even though I didn't get a massive blood trail, which is one of the things that you guys really, I believe that you guys pride yourself on, is that puncture and that wound channel. I loved the fact that I didn't even think twice about the accuracy of the broadhead. When I went full draw and I stepped out around this bush, not knowing where the elk was going to be, and I took that, well, for all you listeners, we have it all filmed. You're going to see it on our show, Soul Seekers, that's going to be coming out in 2021. But I didn't range. I had a great guess and estimate of my ranges from prior experience. Put my 70 pin on it and sent it, and that sucker was like slow motion, and it stuck right in that elk. I had a lighted knock, and so all I could see was the red knock, and that elk took off running, and I was like, dude, yes. And it went a little further than I would expect, but at the same time, I found my elk, and it wasn't that much longer after I shot it that I found it, and the rest is history. And holy smokes! If you go on listeners, if you go to the Instagram channel, the Soulful Hunter Podcast on Instagram, I actually posted a little video of what the inside wound by the front shoulder looked like after it broke off the broadhead and it was running around with that bad boy. So you guys go check that out. But firsthand experience of using your broadhead, I loved it. I got no complaints. And I've only ever compared it to, I've shot another elk with a Q80 Exodus, and it did its job as well. But I really love how, especially because you guys have two heads that we'll talk about here coming up, but your original head, dude, that I don't think that can fly any more true to a field point than what it does. Like, that's really impressive.
Yeah, we've had I don't know how much experience you have or speaking with people that shoot crossbows, but there's a bad recipe for crossbows and fixed blade broadheads. They just don't blend well because of the fact that broadheads induce so much turbulence on the front end of the arrow that it causes the arrow to spin out of alignment at high speeds. And crossbows are, traditionally in your upper threes, mid fours. We shot Chad's TAC Elite gun at 450 feet per second. Yeah. So we've had a ton of people, crossbow guys, and like I said, not knocking broadhead companies. You're going to hear that a lot from Brandon and I, because that's our take. We don't ever want to, put another broadhead company, bash them or anything like that. But we've had a lot of people reach out shooting crossbows. And guys are pretty much stacking bolt on top of bolt. They're ripping their nocks off and deveining their bolts at 100+ yards. So out past that, we've had people even tell us that they'll outgroup field points. That's how well these broadheads fly. And we've had some people come back and say, hey, these things aren't flying that they're not flying true. And Brandon and I, and Brandon can speak to this. The broadheads fly so well that they'll actually tell you what's wrong with your setup. They'll tell you if you're underspined or overspined, if you're not dead, if you're not shooting absolute tacks out to distance. And that's not moving a bunch of stuff to get yourself there. Like some people will move their arrow rest to match up we're talking about out of the gate, you're shooting your field points. Like if your stuff's set up right, you should be bombing your knocks off out as far out as you can accurately shoot.
Our favorite customer response is, my previous broadhead shot with my field points. Why doesn't your broadhead? And that's my favorite, because I tell them to walk back, tune their bow, and then they reach back out a day later and go, oh yeah, I needed to move my rest. Now they're shooting like tacks, and the other broadhead shoots like garbage. It's like, yeah it makes sense. And the reason why really is because of it. First off, it's a small diameter head. Well, we wanted a small diameter head because we wanted to be able to shoot accurate out to long range.
Yep.
But with a small diameter head, we were still able to increase lethality because we have the largest cutting surface area than any other broadhead on the market. You can take a 3-inch, rage or whatever out there, add up all the cutting surface area, we still have more cutting surface area than a 3-inch rage. So the lethality, we were able to actually increase lethality while maintaining our accuracy. Now it's even larger holes, as you're going to find out when you shoot that 125 XL. We can get into that at any point in time, but for your listeners, one of the cool things about that 125 XL, and Mike and I will tell you, we don't think you need it because we're in love with our original broadhead, and that's what we both shoot. But we actually created that 125 XL to have the exact same drag coefficient as our standard 125.
I love that. So I just want to jump in here real quick because I shoot a PSE Carbon Air, and anyone who shoots PSE knows all about their grip and how their grip will teach you very quickly whether or not you're holding the bow or gripping the bow properly or incorrectly. And so that, as a new hunter, so I've only been I actually have only bow hunted 2 years in the field, but really 3 years since I've had my bow. And dude, shooting accurately and learning how to get tuned up and grip and all that stuff, it takes a while. And so as a new shooter, here I was trying to get dialed in with field points, and then also trying to bridge the gap with the broadheads. And I'm like, oh, dude, the last thing you want to have is doubt in the products you're using. You know, being a former sports person and a former athlete, played college sports, it's like, dude, if you didn't step onto that field knowing that you were going to win, or knowing that you were going to throw the winning touchdown or hit the home run or be able to do what you practice and train for, then it's a matter of mind, and you're going to end up failing. And so one of the things that I loved when I was shooting your broadhead is like, instantly I was right with my field tips, and I felt confident and comfortable. And one of the things I like to do when I shoot my broadheads is I'll shoot multiple types of broadheads to see how my shot is for consistency. And I, right before my hunt, I was like, okay, I haven't shot long range for a while because it was rifle season and deer season, all this stuff. I got my elk hunt coming up. I ran down to local public land, put my target out at 60, took a couple shots with your broadhead, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm good to go. And it turns out I had to take a shot at 70 on my elk, and I was like, dude, if it wasn't for having good confidence in a product, that doubt, it leaves room for error, and then error happens, and it's not good.
Yeah.
So your design is different than any other design on the market. Who came up with it? How did you come up with it? And what spurred it on?
I wish I could take all the credit, but I can't. It was Micah's brainchild.
Yeah, it's kind of a conglomeration of what works, what doesn't work, why do certain things work in broadheads, and why don't they, you know, why does other stuff not work? So thinking about having penetration is awesome, but if you the biggest thing that I saw in I, you know, anybody can speak to it, especially once you start hunting enough and bow hunting enough, you're going to lose animals. Unfortunately, it's just the name of the game. You want to minimize that, and part of minimizing that is what Brandon and I truly believe. You know, we've created the most ethical broadhead in the world for taking game, whether it's small game, big game. The reason being is when we set out and designed that broadhead, we wanted something that would hit like a hammer and leave a hole that cannot collapse. And when we started mulling over different broadheads, one of the things we talked about was, you know, all broadheads kill by hemorrhaging. That's what broadheads do. They kill by cutting and hemorrhaging. But if you can hit and induce air into a cavity, followed by what's called cavitation, where you're leaving the hole open and shooting a projectile driving through that hole, where you create a vacuum effect, you're going to actually the lethality of your broadhead has now bordered onto what rifle rounds are doing. And rifle rounds, gunshots, everything, they kill by percussion. And that percussion is by leaving a hole open and inducing cavitation, putting pressure into a cavity, followed by a negative vacuum. So we took the hemorrhaging end of it and said, okay, we're going to cut because we have edges. It's going to cut no matter what. But if we can induce this thing to drive through like a wedge, we're going to create cavitation by having the arrow shaft basically in a pocket behind the broadhead, where the broadhead's working almost like a Mack truck driving down the road. And in layman's terms, when we go to shows, I always tell people, shooting our broadhead is like driving a Mack truck down the road, and you have a string of Honda Civics behind that Mack truck. You line those Honda Civics on the side, they're going to get bounced around from all what's called turbulence. Every broadhead produces turbulence. Every arrow produces turbulence. Now, when you take that string of Honda Civics and slide it in tight behind the Mack truck, they sit there, and you can take your foot off the gas pedal and your car wants to speed up because your arrow now has no friction bumping along it. So coming up with this design and trying to figure out what we wanted the arrow shaft to be fully shielded, and you have the Annihilator.
Beautiful. I love it. One of the things that, going back to Brandon, what you mentioned earlier, you guys created an XL broadhead, a little wider diameter, cutting surface, all that stuff. What was the reason behind creating an XL? Was it because you get these guys that are like, oh, that just doesn't look big enough to be able to kill an animal? Or was it? Yeah, go ahead. Jump in.
We wanted to be a crowd pleaser. Guys asked us for a bigger head. We'd be at a trade show, and you'd watch some guys walk by. They'd look at it. It'd take 2 seconds, and they wouldn't even give you the time to talk to them. And they would go, that's badass, but it's too small. See you later. And the reality is we've been trained from the beginning to shoot bigger is better. And what guys don't understand is that's part of the trade-off. The bigger means it doesn't fly as good. The bigger means there's more drag in certain areas, right? Usually with vents and cutouts. It also means louder. And penetration can be an issue. Sure, a 3-inch slash is going to be fantastic, but what are big broadheads known for? Poor penetration, right? Bouncing off of shoulder bones. And it's great to have a 4-inch slash in an animal that ran 8 miles. Sure, you can track him, but he's still living. The reality is we wanted something that is going to drive a hole all the way through. But when we increase the cut diameter, we recognize it is going to open that wound channel even larger. So what we did with the XL is we were the crowd pleaser. We said, fine, we'll give you something bigger. And it will create a bigger hole. But guess what? There's a slight trade-off, not a big trade-off, but there's a slight trade-off between the standard and the XL. And the trade-off is this. I can take any shooter and I can screw on the standard head, and 99% of the time they're going to shoot darts. And you can even put target vanes on it because they don't need steering. And that works really well for the majority of guys, especially guys who don't want to tinker. But if you screw on that XL, it's creating a much larger volume of turbulence. But it's also creating that all the way back past your fletchings, which means you need taller fletchings to stabilize it. And so if you're willing and able to tinker, that's going to be a great head for you at the long range. Our staffers, when we first gave it to those guys, they were so excited because they were shooting darts at 100 yards with them and putting holes right next to the standard 100 grain. But they're also willing to shoot a 3-inch vane with a hard helical. They're not your run-of-the-mill blazers that you're just going to get out of the package of a VAP broadhead or arrow, And so it just depends on who you are as a shooter and what you want and what trade-off you're willing to go for. So we created it. We love it. We're proud of it. We stamped it with the Annihilator, quality of approval. But Mike and I still shoot standards.
I love it. And obviously, chatting with you guys on social media, I'm not exactly sure who I'm chatting with at times. And Brandon, I'm pretty sure it was you who you were like, hey, listen, we have our XLs, but I dare you to just stick with the regulars and shoot that. And I was like, okay, challenge accepted. And when I saw the XLs next to the regulars, I was like, okay, all right, sure.
Yeah.
One question.
But it speaks volumes on just what we're talking about in general, bow hunting, right? And it goes back to what Brandon and I, what we said earlier about ethics and what it does. We know after testing, we know what this broadhead, the little one's capable of. And it has to do with it leaving that wound channel open on the animal, whether it's open on the entrance, open on both sides. that the air induced by that little broadhead is like getting hit with it's like throwing a cantaloupe into an animal's cavity is literally what it's doing, followed by that vacuum. So that little broadhead, and when I say little, you guys saw me, put my little into quotations, but the listeners don't get to see that. But Brandon and I often joke a lot about it, that broadhead being little, but it's literally the Mighty Mouse of broadheads. It's little, but it is absolutely devastating. And it's taken everything from African animals to squirrels to you name it. I mean, it hammers them. So
that's so cool.
A dude last year took a buffalo with one, and we have it on film, and died in a minute and a half, cold stone dead, didn't even walk 10 yards. And it's just, that goes back to the efficacy and an ethical thing. And Micah and I can't accentuate this enough, is there's no other broadhead ever created designed to create sucking chest wounds. There just isn't one. Every single broadhead makes the same hole. And how you test it, if any listeners don't want to listen to us and they just want to test it for themselves, there's a couple basic things you can do. One being, go shoot through something that's steel, like just thin steel. Like, for example, what do we shoot through when we in the beginning? My tire,
50-gallon drum or
50-gallon drum, whatever. And you can see the pattern that every broadhead makes. And then you shoot the Annihilator, and you see the hole is completely blown open. What you're looking for when you do that is it's sheer cutting surface area. And I don't think hunters realize the power behind that cutting surface area. And there won't be another broadhead that comes out that can mimic what it does, because if you change that angle, as we found, it changes flight, it changes penetration. You've got to find that perfect recipe, which is what we've discovered, for it to still be actually not a decrease and still be stabilized in flight. And so we've kind of found that perfect recipe. And so, I think guys really need to look at that when they're analyzing what broadhead they're going to shoot. We can go down the gamut, and we don't knock broadheads, as Micah said, but we can talk all day about shapes, and tell you where they fail in every category and where the Annihilator was designed to excel.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, you're shooting, like I said, if you shoot 3-inch mechanical or whatever it is you shoot, and that's great if you have a 3-foot wide, blood carpet for 1.5 miles. But here's the thing, right? Is one, your animal ran for 1.5 miles. And when I say 1.5 miles, obviously I'm joking, right? But your animal took off running, which means it's building up heat in its cavity. It's putting a bunch of adrenaline into the meat. So these are all the end result, right? Which every bow hunter should strive for the most ethical kill, right? Because we like hunting antlers, and we like going for meat, but meat should be the main priority. That when you're out bow hunting, and why not try to preserve that meat and keep that meat as untainted as possible. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that most broadheads do not allow the animal to succumb to a very fatal death really fast. And right. Our broadhead is very ethical in what it does, and that's killing animals very quickly.
Man, I've seen it firsthand. I saw 2 deer and an elk die, and even though my elk ran off a little bit, I also know that it died quickly, based off where I found it and all that stuff. Okay, so one of the questions I have to follow up on the XL broadhead, and even with the regular, is I shoot a standard shaft, 350 spine arrow. Have you guys found better accuracy or results with small diameter arrow shafts with either your XL or your regular broadhead, or does it not even make a difference?
Doesn't make a difference. You can shoot an 8mm crossbow bolt, and the reason why it doesn't make a difference is because it raises in the back so much higher than the arrow shaft in every scenario. So it doesn't matter what you screw it onto; it still creates, in terms of flight specifically, all broadheads attached to an arrow are fairly destable, but our broadhead is going to be one of the least destable, if not the most stable, because it flies in its own turbulence pocket. So going back to turbulence, when you're a smaller cut diameter, I mean, even our XL is still considered it's not a huge cut diameter, right? I mean, there's a ton of broadheads that are 2 inches, inch and a half, inch and an eighth, whatever. Ours is an inch and a 16th. We create a medium level of turbulence on our smaller head that goes all the way back to the fletchings, as I talked about before. With our inch and a 16th, it's a little bit taller, medium, high. Pretty much every other broadhead has a high amount of turbulence, but it's local to the front of the broadhead. If you were to map it out, and we have documentation about this that we haven't put on our website, but if you've ever been to our trade shows, you've seen our brochures, you've seen the slideshows, and we have all that documentation there. But we do graph that to show people what that turbulence pocket actually looks like. We were able to do that with, real data and real simulation and actually map that. And it's completely different. And when you're able to create that turbulence pocket, it means when there's a crosswind, you're still stable because that crosswind has to go around the turbulence pocket you just created. Not knocking broadheads, but take any 2-blade broadhead. It's lift. I mean, that's an airplane wing, basically, right? You get a crosswind. A lot of the issues with any 2-blade, doesn't matter what it is, it's indoors and in a no crosswind environment, right? Sure, you can get those things to fly, absolutely. What happens when you're shooting across the canyon? What happens when the wind picks up? You're in an outdoor environment. Are you still going to shoot that accurately? And I'd love for your listeners to comment back about their experience about that. You don't have to take my word for it, but everybody's been around a guy with a 2-blade at a long range and seen it float. It's because it's lift.
It's like I mentioned to Brandon earlier. It's like you get out of your car and you take your suitcase into the house when it's really windy, or to the airport. You're getting bounced around a little bit. Now go into your garage, and like I did today, moving inside doors, take a door and put that into the wind and walk into your house and watch you get knocked back or that door come out of your hand. It's just simple physics. You're allowing every rotation of a 2-blade as it stands up vertically, you've increased the amount of drag onto that broadhead, which is going to steer that arrow shaft. Yeah, when it turns another 45 degrees and lays flat, you're fine until it turns 45 more degrees and now that wall's up vertical again. We've eliminated all drag on our broadhead in flight. We've induced a little bit, actually a lot of it, in very small areas on the front to get our entire projectile on target, which is a lot of people forget about it. You have 30 inches of an arrow behind your broadhead, plus they're, say even on the micros, you're half inch to a half inch around, plus your vanes. That's like 60 inches of raw drag behind your broadhead. Yeah, Brandon and I talk about it all the time. We tell people at trade shows, take our broadhead off the arrow, and it's a boat anchor. It's not good for anything. But screw it onto an arrow. Now you've eliminated all drag on the arrow shaft, not only in flight. That's why it flies so well. And I mean, Brandon can speak to this. For 2 months, we had to bite our lip when we first came out because people were like, "Oh, I wouldn't shoot a squirrel with that. That's not going to penetrate. It's not going to do this." But because everyone's so used to the razor blade cut thing and a real thin profile broadhead, well, that's good because you got your broadhead through the animal fast, but you forgot about 60 inches of raw drag that's behind your broadhead.
Yeah.
We create the whole projectile to go through the animal fast.
I love it. Brandon, you look like you wanted to say something right there. Do you want to jump in?
Well, so it just, and I'm actually stealing this from Micah, and it's funny because it's so true. If you've ever shot a different broadhead, which we all have, go shoot it into a target. When you pull it out of the target, what's left on your arrow? Residue from the target. And it's frustrating because then you got to sit there. I've even had to take sandpaper and scrape it off. It's frustrating. Right? Or use your knife or whatever. Even when you're shooting field points, we'll go shoot the Reading tournament, and our favorite shoot of the year. And all day long, we're cleaning our arrows, because it's not broadheads, it's field points, And so think about it. Why do field points? Why do they make bulbous field points? Why do they now make tapered shafts? Because they're trying to accomplish the same exact thing. They want to reduce friction on the arrow shaft as it goes in so it pulls out of the target easier. Well, we did something, we kind of one-upped them, and we added it to a broadhead. And once you punch a hole, but you also reduce friction on your arrow shaft, we'll be the only broadhead you could blindfold Micah and I. You could shoot 100 broadheads into a target blindfold us. We could walk up, pull every one, and we'll tell you which one you shot with the Annihilator without looking, because we'll be the only one without residue left on that arrow shaft right behind the broadhead.
Because it's not getting hot. It's not heating up the rubber inside the target and melting it. That's what it is. It's melting that rubber onto your arrow shaft. And for all the listeners, I mean, everybody that shoots field points, right? Field point is great because they fly well because the turbulence. There's nothing created on the front of the arrow shaft. But when it hits an object, everything sucks down on the arrow shaft so hard and so tight that the rubber or whatever they use, the foam, is heated up and it melts onto your arrow shaft. That's why you got to sit there and scrape it off. Shoot the Annihilator or shoot a bunch of other broadheads, you're going to have the same thing. Then shoot the Annihilator and you'll just pull it right out and there'll be nothing on the arrow shaft because the arrow is sitting in a hollow hole that the head created.
Man, I love it. Okay, I want to get into some feedback that I've received on my content that I've put out on your broadheads. And so this question or statement, I guess, more comes from my YouTube channel on the broadhead review video that I put up. It says, I'm shooting Annihilators this year. Under 50 yards, they group great. 70 yards, they really start to open up. I can shoot field points in 3-inch group at 70, but the Annihilators were close to 9-inch group. Wish they were more long distance tests with them. Obviously, I read that. People could use a little grammar every now and then with how they type and write, but what do you say to that? Like, Brandon, you and I talked about today, you want to see more long distance tests on broadhead reviews. I totally agree as well. But what's your initial feedback on that?
Brandon, before you answer, on the count of 3, there's one word that you and I could say at the same time. If they're saying that they're not grouping at 50, or they're grouping at 50 and then they're not grouping at 70, something's up with the arrow. On the count of 3, we're going to say it, okay? See if we both get it.
I'm too tired.
Okay, I'll say it for Brandon, and then Brandon can continue. I would say without a doubt that they're underspined.
Yeah,
underspined. They're either right on the verge or they're underspined, and it's that turbulence that's created because the arrow's trying so hard to get out of that paradox, that archer's paradox, that it can't stabilize itself. And so at 50 yards it's on, but at 70 it's starting to wobble really bad because it's still trying to figure itself out.
Ah, gotcha.
I would have said the other of there's two reasons why we hit all the time. I would have said the other
arrow rest.
Rest, walk back to your bow.
Walk back to, yep.
The only reason why I say that is because, well, first off, I think walk back tuning your bow is one of the most underrated things. Guys go walk into an archery shop and they think they're dialed because they're paper tuned. Yep. And we can talk for days about this, but paper tuning, guys, is only a starting place. It does not mean your bow is tuned. It only is telling you you're ready to go shoot at a target. That's all that it's really telling you. And that your arrow is shooting straight at 10 or 15 yards, right? Take that thing out, get it dialed, shoot it, walk back to your bow and get that rest shooting correctly, because you got to make sure there's no kick on your arrow. That's broadheads aside. Just shoot it with your field points. Walk back to your bow. If that happens, I've never had one customer ever walk back to and call me and go, oh, man, that didn't work, That never happens. For some reason, the email is left blank on the other end after 3 days, and it's just, and I can't accentuate that enough to every archer out there. Walk back to your bow. And if you don't know what that is, there's a billion videos on YouTube. It's super easy. It could take 20 minutes of your time. And that is what's going to tell you for your hand torque, for your bow, for your arrow setup, how you're shooting. So assuming you're spot.
Usually an arrow drop too for us, an arrow dropping. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Johnny. I think did you say it grouping? Was it going to the left or to the right, or was it going up or down?
He just said it opened up to 9 inches.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if it opened up in a circle, then that's shooter error. But if it opened up one way to the right or to the left or down, preferably down is usually an underspined issue. Right. But usually if it's left and right, it's an arrow rest issue, and walk back tuning is completely the way to go. Most people now that are the listeners now could go shoot their bow at 60 yards and hold dead nuts at 100 yards, and they'll be off to the left or to the right, 5 or 6, maybe even a foot and then they'll chase their arrow rest, and now at 50 or 60 yards they're screwed up again, and it's because they haven't walked back to that rest.
I love this. You just gave me some great archery information. I paper tune my bow even before I go out and shoot my target, and then from shooting my target, then I'm screwing on my broadheads and doing all that. And it's really interesting, this perspective. Super awesome. You guys did a great job answering that. I'm going to throw you the next one. This is another comment on the video. It says problem, and excuse how I say this because I'm reading this how someone typed it. So it says problem we saw during season with Annihilator was a serious deflection issue off the ribs of a slightly quartering away shot. Hit was perfect just behind the crease of the shoulder. Tracked the bull for 4 days plus add a crawl. Nickel or dime size blood drops at best. If perfectly broadside may have been very different story. Only explanation is the head never entered the chest cavity and had same thing happen once before with a 4-blade whack-em on a follow-up shot. Luckily, first shot did the job. Have to believe the same thing happened with the Annihilator. Obviously, I just read you something, and each scenario is completely different, and there's all sorts of different stuff like that. But when you talk about deflection off of whether shoulder blade or ribs, what have you guys seen with your experience of your broadhead? Because obviously, I mean, I want to advertise your guys' company and your product, so I'd love to hear what your response is to this.
Yeah, we had a guy reach out before we knew him. He'd done a 25 broadhead showdown with like fixed blade broadheads, and I think it was 25 at the top at the time. And this was about almost a year and a half ago when we came out. And the deflection test that he shot with our broadhead, we were at the top for not deflecting. We have a ton of customers like yourself that are shooting severely quartered away animals, and it's staying so true when it enters the cavity that it's coming out exactly the same line that it went in. Now, a 70-yard shot on an elk going from behind the rib cage out the front shoulder, that broadhead is traveling through probably about 4 feet of meat and mass, viscera and bone. So for it to deflect, and I'm not knocking if the guy who wrote this or the guy who wrote this is a listener, but if that broadhead did not deflect at those distances, it's definitely not going to deflect at shorter distances. So what we've seen and what we've heard, I'm really surprised by that, because we get a ton of comments saying, "Oh man, I shot this broadhead through the front shoulder plate of an elk, and it came out as back ham bone." We threw the shoulder on this side, and it stayed true and came out the other side in front of the leg bone. We shot through both bones, both shoulders, and it stayed true. So our experience and the vast majority of people that call in, barring I can't even remember the last time I heard anybody say anything about a deflection shot, but the experience is that the Annihilator does not deflect; it stays true. Whether or not just in a mishap, maybe that animal at a quartering away decided to turn a little more, and now you glanced off of a bending rib cage. I mean, that's totally doable that's doable even with a rifle, right?
Yep.
But that's kind of our experience with that, and the generalized feedback.
To echo Micah's thoughts there too, and there's so many reviews online, customer reviews. We try to do our best to post. Anytime somebody posts on social, we like reposting. If anybody follows us on social, you'll see that the majority of our posts are customer kills and their testimonies. And you can go through and read them, and there's plenty talking about it didn't deflect, etc. I'm sure the guys that had a negative experience aren't posting that as often. So, take it with a grain of salt, right?
Yeah.
Just in honor and respect out of all of the listeners, right? But one of the things we do pride ourselves on is in our own deflection test. And if you want a third-party one, go watch that one by Travis Fields, who is now a great friend of ours as a result of him doing that test. By the way, if you do check it out, he paid for his broadheads. He actually asked for free ones, and we told him no.
Yeah.
We're like, we don't know you, and we don't give away free broadheads. So No. So he's like, fine, I like your broadhead anyways. He bought it, and he was actually one of the best broadhead tests I have ever seen. So one of the things you asked me earlier, Johnny, was talking about broadhead tests and stuff, and I would love to comment about that, and we'd love to see more broadhead tests, but his was the best that we had seen to date. But his deflection test was 45-degree angle in wood, and the trajectory that the Annihilator did was unreal. We had a complete pass-through, no drag, no nothing, compared to two-blade single bevels, compared to, you name the top of the broadheads out there. So every shot is different, though, guys, and, there's no perfect broadhead. There's no perfect archery equipment, for every scenario. And I couldn't begin to try to say, oh, this happened in that case, or, whatever. But we've got plenty of pictures and images that we posted on our social, though, of femur bones being cracked and, ribs being busted in half. And so you can go check.
Yeah. I didn't want to put you on the spot and read off like negative comments, but it was just like, this is feedback off of a video I did. And I think it's very fun to hear your guys' response in relation to that. And that's also what makes awesome companies, is that customer relations and the communication that companies have with their end users. And, that's why I love Vortex. When I go to reach out to Vortex, I'm always getting a response back. They're always working with me on different things. And because of that, whether their glass is the superior glass in the world or it's not, I love Vortex because of their company as well as their products. And
Right.
I think right here, having this conversation is only more of a reason for people to fall in love with Annihilator, because of who you are, how you show up, and what you stand for. So,
Well, I appreciate you calling that out. And the reality is we are just two hunters that care a lot about the animals that we take. We don't take that lightly.
Yeah.
If I'm going to draw back on an animal and I'm going to send that arrow, I want that animal to die as fast as possible. I cared about that. I don't want a track job, and I want that arrow to fly true. I want that experience to be everything I dream of and sleep about and think about all year long, right? We're just two regular hunters that had an idea and chasing after the passion of bringing that idea to life. And, I love the job that I had, but I'm grateful for this one, right? And I get to work at a company. And so we know where these guys are coming from, and we love offering good customer experience. But we also love being honest, because the reality is your users are going to tell you whether you made the product right. It doesn't matter what we say. They're the ones that get to evaluate you. And that's how we've grown this company. It hasn't been marketing dollars. You don't see us advertising a lot of vet magazines. You don't see us on a ton of TV shows and doing paid sponsorships and even ads on Facebook. And, all those things are great, not knocking anybody who doesn't, but we've grown this company by sheer word of mouth. And that's what we pride ourselves on. That's what we're excited about. And when we get those emails, ask Micah, he's working full time. I'm at a different job right now, and we're trying to get him over at Annihilator full time. And, I'm sending him stuff constantly saying, check this out, check this out, check this out, in celebration of, hearing from our customers, et cetera. So it's what fuels us and drives us, and it's exciting for us to be a part of. So,
yeah. I just got to jump in here. So when I shot my elk, and on social media, one of you guys responded with, "Oh, awesome! How far did it go?" And I was like, probably about 200 yards." And your response was, "I'm sorry to hear that." I was like, "Oh man, thank you." However, I was actually gonna brag about your broadhead and what it did, but I appreciate your condolences on the fact that I had to go an extra couple hundred yards to get my elk.
Well, if most people,
right?
When you think about it, you're talking about a less than marginal hit, right? If you behind the rib cage on one side, you definitely missed that lung out the shoulder. The other side, you caught that far lung either high or low. And everyone knows that elk, if you've heard people tell stories, I'm not talking about the campfire drinking beer stories. I'm talking about just stories in the field. Elk can go a very, very long way, if not completely out of the unit that you're hunting on one lung.
Right.
So for a broadhead to go into the guts of an animal, which elk hunting. It does happen, and we've had friends who have done that. But if you're able to find that animal, that type of animal, they're a very hardy animal. They're not a soft animal like a bear or something like that. If you're able to find an animal like that on a sub-marginal hit at 200 yards, that's telling you that whatever projectile you threw at them is doing its job. That's exactly what it's doing. It's keeping the wound channel open. It's inducing that air into the cavity, which a lot of people, one of the things that people have commented back on us is, hey, when I opened that animal up, it literally looked like a blender went off inside of them. And it's because of the fact that we're inducing air on that hit. Now imagine that air going into guts and everything else, and then in through a lung and everything else. You're blowing all that matter out of the way because of the fact that all the cells inside your body are, 70, 80, 90% water, right? And you're inducing air not at 1,000 feet per second or 2,000 feet per second like a rifle. You're still doing it, but we're inducing a very large pressure into a cavity that the water inside their cells, inside blood, everything is jumping out of the way. So you're basically shocking and awing that animal when it's hit with the broadhead so fast. That's why a lot of people will tell us, hey, the animal literally took 10 steps and flopped over like it didn't even know what was going on. It's because they cannot handle that pressure swing inside their cavity. That's what the Annihilator does.
I love it. And for listeners, I can't remember my exact total weight of my arrow. I want to say roughly like in the 430 to 440 range. I could be off. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to go weigh my arrow at the end of this. But I'm shooting a 70-pound limbs, cranked down all the way, and a 350 spine arrow with 125 grain broadhead. And so my arrow, I'm in the 390s for my feet per second. So I'm shooting a pretty confident setup. And so
290.
Yeah, 290.
290. Yeah, 290. Sorry.
I was like, you're sending rockets to Mars. Dialing in launch codes.
Right. So yeah, 290, when I hit like the 300s, 302s, and I was losing stability, had to figure out my setup a little bit more and weighted it down and got it down. And I was accurate and I loved it and I love my setup. And I'm honestly, this last spring, I had full intentions of arrowing my very first black bear. But, well, you'll see on, for those of you who watch on Carbon TV and all that, we're going to have episode 1 of Soul Seekers coming up this spring. However, because of a miss by my good buddy Two Shot on the rifle, I decided to quickly follow up and get a shot with the rifle. Even though I brought my bow and I had my release on my wrist for the shot and everything, it felt horrible. But that is my goal for 2021. I am arrowing a black bear. And it's going to be with an Annihilator Broadhead.
Cool.
So, real quick, one of the things that I really love, my sponsors for this podcast are T&K Hunting Gear and Crazy Elk Company. American made, I love that American pride. You guys are designed and manufactured in the USA. I love that. Was that something that was hard for you guys to come up with when you started your company, or was that one of the intentions that you had for Annihilator?
Go ahead, Brandon.
We wanted it. It took a long time to figure out how to do that. Micah and I didn't come to market in 6 months. We took how long? 2
years? Yeah.
Yeah, over 2 years. It wasn't because we couldn't hurry up and get to market. We had the design from day one. In fact, if I were to show you all the iterations, you'd go, "That's not many iterations." It was kind of insane how we arrived at this so rapidly with so few iterations. But we did a lot of testing. We spent our time on the manufacturing process, getting it right to make sure that we can scale it. And we wanted to have a U.S. made product. And it was actually difficult because it is a lot cheaper to go overseas. And especially when you're making it out of billet. Just everything is cheaper when you do it that way. But the reality is you also can lose quality. And, right now we're feeding families with the people that manufacture our heads in-house and the parts that are not in-house that are also outsourced. it's something that we have pride in, and we're excited to be able to offer a U.S. made product, and the quality is there. We kind of joke around a little bit, but guys don't realize it, because of our price point. We're not $100, $130 for Backcountry broadheads like some of these other premium heads. But that doesn't mean you're not getting a premium head. We chose to go at the price point that we want because we wanted an American-made, high-quality premium product at a price that everybody could afford. And we knew that if we were able to do that, that we would be able to have a significant impact on the market. We know what our head does. We knew it would just be time for the rest of the world to figure that out. And we didn't want any barriers to entry to using that because And
a lot of people don't understand tolerances and what machining and stuff like that. The tolerances that our broadhead carries, I mean, it's second to none. How these things are manufactured and the processes that go in and the oversight and documentation and mapping and programming. I mean, it's literally night and day when you're comparing products.
There was a point in time when we were first getting production volumes that we would have an Excel spreadsheet of every single broadhead ran through the machine, and we would check run out on every single one and try to hold a tolerance that was sub what you would see on the tightest tolerances on arrow manufacturers and the best of the best. And the concentricity on our broadheads is second to none, and that matters. When you go shoot at 100 yards, that matters. Yeah. And you can spin test our arrows. We even did we'll shoot these things into concrete and spin test them, and they don't come out of alignment because we put a lot of meat on that shaft. But there's also, you'll notice there's no wobble when you screw a broadhead into an insert. Inserts vary quite a bit depending on what insert you use, but you're going to see that ours bite in one turn on the thread because we have the right thread depth with the right tolerances on there. And they're not backing out easily, and they're not going to wobble. They're going to be as concentric as you can make it without adding things like O-rings that do change shape and, do break and et cetera. So we do pride ourselves on those, on our process controls. We pride ourselves on the overall craftsmanship. And if you've ever opened up a pack, which I know you have, one of the first things that we hear from all of our customers is this thing is awesome. Like it's a work of art. Like, this is rad.
It's sweet. It's sweet looking. I freaking love it. And so I just want to go and say, for listeners who are unfamiliar with what billet is, you're starting with a little tiny block of steel and you are machining it down into your broadhead off of that, correct?
We actually do not.
We're casted, which means, we're a casted company. So they had a cast. We got hot material that goes down into the cast is formed, and then from there, what's cool about what we're able to do is we're able to grind it into the tolerances that Brandon was talking about that are so fine-tuned to where think about the turbulence when that thing's turning. Those pockets are so precise. That's why that broadhead can fly so straight, is because they're exactly the same.
Beautiful.
The grind down each side is exactly the same.
Right. The consistency and the repeatability is what we were fighting for.
Yeah. And I do know that when I took out all of your broadheads and weighed all of them compared to a lot of other companies, yours were extremely similar. When you open up any other package of broadheads and you're off by multiple grains. And if you're wondering why your broadheads aren't grouping, well, it's because your broadheads are weighing different weights and they're taking off on you. So just lastly, I love about your broadheads, I'm like a little fanboy right here for you guys. I carry a Benchmade knife, altitude knife, and I carry a sharpener with me in the field. I'm not a fan of replaceable blades. I thought I was at first until I started breaking them and trying to work around joints and all that. So the fact that I carry a sharpener in the field with me when I hunt is awesome, that your broadheads are self-sharpening to just be able to put it right on my guided field sharpener and go to town. I love that.
So you could shoot all the sage grouse you want with the same broadhead and then turn around and go whack an elk at 50 yards with it. So it speaks volumes. It's just one of the other things that Brandon and I wanted to add when we came to, hey, what's the final outlook of this thing? We wanted it to be, hey, you can lay it down flat on a stone, you can sharpen it, you can clean it up. And that's one of the things, one of the feedback we got, because we are a 4140, the steel does have carbon in it. You're going to get rust spotting, especially if you hunt like the Pacific Northwest where it's rainy, or even elk hunting, and you get rain for a day or two. You can take that broadhead, lay it flat and run it flat, sharpen it back up, knock the little rust residue off of it, spray some oil on it, and keep on going.
Yep.
Beautiful. It's good to know, because I just pulled out my quiver this weekend and was teaching a newer archery hunter about broadheads and all this stuff, and I was like, oh, there's a little rust. But then that makes total sense why you created it the way you did. There's always a purpose behind everything, even if people don't realize it at first. So one of the things I love to ask all my guests is, what has hunting done for you? Being that this is a Soulful Hunter and we're here to reimagine and reinvent hunting for the world and how it's viewed, and that our mission is transforming lives through primal adventure, what has hunting done for you? What has it done for your soul? What has it done for your family, your community? It goes so many different directions. And Brandon, you look like you're ready to answer this right away, so I'm going to throw it to you first.
Picking on me, huh? Yeah, I as I said earlier, I did not grow up in a hunting family. For me, it was actually a connection to somebody that was really close to me that passed away. As a kid, I would go visit him. He was my uncle, and I grew up in the suburbs of Seattle. I call it the concrete jungle. And when you get out in the mountains of Montana, there's a stark difference. Anyways, just for years of getting out with my uncle, he just kind of opened my eyes to the world of the outdoors. So I guess started backpacking, snowboarding, kind of taking my own journey. But he was an avid hunter. I kind of never got into it, and he ended up passing away. And as kind of a strange way to actually just kind of honor and remember him, I was like just really curious to, all right, what did he like about hunting? I was backpacking a bunch, and I got kind of bored just sticking on trails, and fishing's fun, backcountry fishing, stuff like that. But I really love the idea of just getting off trail and going to hike. And, you'd see so many animals and stuff. And so long story short, that was kind of what spurred me to get into it. But once I did, just kind of the freedom that you really experience when you're out in the woods. There's nothing that compares to being close to an animal, especially, a screaming bull elk at 20 yards who doesn't know you're there. If you want something to stick the hair up on the back of your neck, that'll do it, right? You can take anybody in the world and you put them in that environment, they'll never forget that and for the rest of their life. And that happened to me, and it's just it's all encompassing the experience. And when you can add good relationships to it, and just kind of the adventure and the chase, if you will, I think that there's just something innate in us, in our very makeup to enjoy that chase. And of course, there's nothing more rewarding than carrying that meat on your back. There's nothing worse and more rewarding at the same time than hauling out an elk 4 miles or 4,000 feet in elevation or whatever. Luck would have it that my first elk kill, I was solo, and I did have to pack out an elk 4,000 feet in elevation. And it was the most grueling thing I've ever done in my entire life. But for some stupid reason, I keep wanting to do it.
It's so awesome and epic, and it's one of the things that words really do not describe. It is something that you have to experience for yourself to truly grasp and understand how powerful hunting is. And I totally agree with you. I love that. That is, it's a special bond when someone picks up hunting as an adult, what it does to them, rather than it being like, oh, well, this is just the way it was. This is just the way it is. This is just how I've done it. I've always talked to, because I'm in the world of education and getting people into hunting, when I talk to people who've been raised as hunters, and I'm like, hey, you're very knowledgeable in a topic. Would you mind giving me some information, or can you share with this person? More often than not, if you ask them, okay, why do you do that? Or why did you do this? They're like, That's a good question. I don't know, just because that's the way I've always done it. But when we get into it as an adult, we really truly dissect and grasp onto all the minute details of what hunting is and does. And it's so powerful. I love that. I love that, Brandon. That's a great story. Micah, what has hunting done for you?
I think for me, I think it opened my eyes into a kind of my past. I think the past of all humans. Some people, it goes back to some people have it, some people want it, and some people don't. Right? There's hunters, there's not hunters. So I think the people that are truly passionate about it, and it's like in our soul, it's everything. Like we eat and breathe and sleep it. It's because for thousands of years ago, the same people that were related to somewhere, they did the same exact thing, and they probably felt the same exact way that we do. They just had a different understanding of it. For me, when I go out, it's the almost the fear of the unknown. Anything's going to happen. Anything can happen, and it's on every situation is different. You can't go out and say, I'm going to kill something today, or I'm going to harvest this, or I'm going to harvest that. It might be, hey, you're going to have to wait till next year or 2 years or whatever. For me, it's the unknown, the unknown of where you're at, the fact that anything can happen. You have to be prepared. You're in the backcountry. A snowstorm could come in. You could get stuck. You may sleep on the mountain. You may sleep in snow. You may get so turned around that you don't know which way's up, which way's down. So for me, I think it's the unknown. And a lot of it for me too is I didn't get into it until I was in my mid-20s. I grew up in a family with 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And my dad, basically, when he wanted to get away, he got away to go hunting, which is smart, right? Leave the hustle and bustle, left the kids at home. So I was never around it. But as I got older, I realized that was the only time to really spend like quality outdoor time with my dad. So then I started hunting. And as soon as I started it, like literally, it was like a light bulb went on before, even when I was taking the hunter's ed classes and I hadn't even been out hunting. For me, like a light bulb went on. I fell in love with it immediately, and that was before even stepping foot in the field. So I just think that some people it's ingrained. Some people it's a learned habit. It's almost like a refined taste, so to speak. And like I said, I think that some people have it, and some people are born into it, and some people learn to love it. And that's kind of my take on my quick spin on hunting and what it does for me.
I love it. It's a powerful story. I am a huge believer in the tribal mentality where there's roles within the tribe and not everyone's meant to be a hunter. Some people need to be, at the camp doing different things. However, for those of us who are meant to be hunters, there is that constant knock and prick and pull on our soul. And like you said, I don't define myself as a hunter, but I know that I would say I was meant to hunt without question. I was meant to be in the pursuit. And I just recorded with Robbie Denning here last week, and his episode's going to be, or actually by the time this show airs, his episode will be out already. But he said, to quote, I forget who he was quoting, but he goes, "I hunt to have hunted." He goes, "It's hard to put it into words other than the fact that I just need to experience it. And that is just what is calling out to my soul." And I really love that. Okay, so wrapping up the show, guys, how can people get a hold of you? Where do they find your products? All that stuff. Let's pub Annihilator.
Sure.
Yeah, you can go on to our website at www.annihilatorbroadheads.com. You can follow us on social, any of the social platforms, Instagram, Facebook. But also, use your resource. Pro shops are there for a reason. They're not there just to stand alone and make money from you. They're there to educate you on quality products. Get into your local archery shop and pro shop and talk to those guys and have them order up. If they're not carrying them. I think that the ATA show, which is the Archery Trade Association show, is still going on because they couldn't have it in person this year like they normally do at the convention center. Still going on online. So we're still participating in that. They can get in and order up through that way. Just jump on the website and get into it.
I love it. I love it. Guys, thank you so much. I know that I've talked to a local archery shop here that doesn't carry you guys, and we're going to make sure you're on their shelves. Also, another archery shop of mine that I'm going to be talking to about you guys because I love your broadheads. I've had great experiences with them. And at the end of the day, you as the end user still have to do and make the shot yourself. So, you know, not everyone, it's not one size fits all. Everyone's got to find their niche and their mark and what they love. But I think I've fallen in love with what you guys do and what you stand for. And I really appreciate that. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this episode. Go check out Annihilator Broadheads. Put them on. Get some trials with them. Shoot them. See what you think. Let me know on feedback either through on the podcast or YouTube channel or all that. But thank you for tuning in. Remember, everybody, that life happens for you. It doesn't happen to you, and that you are in control of creating your each and every moment as you go forward. Freedom on, everybody. And as always, stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter Podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.